As soon as Trump starts targeting Iran's electrical power plants, everything on the other side of the Persian Gulf will be wrecked. And so my advice to people in these countries is to leave tonight.
What is going on, everybody? Nirvana here. And listen, I need you to stop whatever you are doing and pay attention to this one, because Professor Marandi just delivered one of the most serious and specific warnings you are going to hear from anyone connected to Iranian strategic thinking. He is telling the world plainly that if Trump strikes Iran's power plants and gas infrastructure, everything on the other side of the Persian Gulf gets destroyed. Every single Gulf state, the oil stops, the gas stops, the petrochemicals stop, and the global economic crash that follows will make 1,929 look like a minor inconvenience. And then he told people living in Qatar, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Bahrain to leave tonight. Not tomorrow, tonight. This is not a man venting emotions on television. This is deliberate deterrence communication delivered publicly to an international audience, and every American paying over $100 to fill their tank needs to understand what the next escalation actually looks like. This clip is recent, and every word in it is urgent. Hit that like button, subscribe to Norveda's Take, and let's get into it.
And in the coming hours, if Trump decides to strike Iran's critical infrastructure, Iran will force them to pay a price beyond their imagination. Iran is prepared for all-out war. It has not shown its true power yet. It is holding back. And all those family dictatorships in the Persian Gulf, in Qatar, these proxies of the regime in Washington, the Emirates, the Bahraini regime, the Saudi regime, the Kuwaiti regime, all of them, every single one of them, they are complicit in this war. They assisted the United States in slaughtering Iranians. They've been assisting the United States for all these years in all their wars, whether in Yemen or whether in Iraq. When they invaded Iraq, these countries, these regimes, they had funded Saddam Hussein in the 1980s. They gave him hundreds of billions of dollars. But when their masters in Washington told them to turn against Saddam Hussein, they did so immediately. So these regimes will pay the ultimate price within hours. As soon as Trump starts targeting Iran's electrical power plants, everything on the other side of the Persian Gulf will be wrecked. And so my advice to people in these countries is to leave tonight, because we don't know what this madman in Washington wants to do. He is completely irrational. He is moody. He has mood swings. He says one thing now, and he'll say something completely different in an hour from now. So we have no idea where he's going to go, but we're prepared for the worst. And we've already shown him that. The Iranians have already shown him that. When the Israeli regime struck Iran's critical gas infrastructure, with the consent of the United States, Trump is lying that he didn't know. The U.S. did know. If he personally did not know, that just shows how ignorant he is. But when they struck, Iran immediately hit back very hard, and Trump was forced to back off because he knows what this means. So if they strike Iran's critical infrastructure, that will be the end of oil and gas in the Persian Gulf. And the same is true for the regime in Baku, which is a close ally of the Israeli regime. Their oil and gas will no longer be exported in the near future. So Trump has to be very careful, because if this happens, then it no longer matters if the Strait of Hormuz is opened or not. If there is some sort of agreement, there will be no more oil or gas or petrochemicals, and no ships to take those non-existent oil and gas and petrochemicals. And that would lead to a global economic crash that the world has never seen in the last century. will be far worse than 1929. And the world will know that this is Trump's doing, and it is all for Zionism. And if anyone asks, why is Iran striking back at these regimes? Because without their support, without giving the U.S. their airspace, without giving the U.S. their territory, without allowing the U.S. to fire missiles from their territory on a daily basis, there would be no war today. So they are fully complicit. And Iran did not start this war, and Iran did not start striking infrastructure. Everything that Iran has done till now has been in retaliation. So hopefully the madman in Washington, someone will force him to comprehend that the price that he will pay for this is beyond imagination. But Iran is prepared. Iran will not back down. And it is waiting for the 48 hours to finish to see what it has to do.
Let us talk about what Marandi actually just did in that clip, because this was not an emotional outburst. This was a carefully constructed deterrence communication, and understanding that framework is the only way to understand why it matters as much as it does. Deterrence works by making the cost of an action so clearly and credibly communicated that the actor considering that action decides the price is too high to pay. Nuclear deterrence worked throughout the Cold War, not because nuclear weapons were used, but because the consequences of using them were communicated clearly enough that both sides made the rational calculation that first use was unacceptable. What Marandi's doing here is communicating a specific cost matrix for a specific potential American action, strike Iran's critical infrastructure, and the response will not be proportionate military retaliation. The response will be the deliberate destruction of energy infrastructure across the entire Gulf. Qatar, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain, every single one. Not as collateral damage, but as strategic retaliation for documented complicity in this war. And the downstream consequence of that produces a global economic collapse worse than 1929. That is the cost being communicated. The question is whether anyone in Washington is actually hearing it. The Gulf state complicity argument is the one that most Western media coverage has completely buried. These countries are not neutral bystanders. The United States has military bases in Qatar, the UAE, Bahrain, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia. American operations against Iran have been launched from or coordinated through assets in these territories. They have provided airspace, logistics, and territorial access that makes this war operationally possible. Without that access, the strategic picture changes completely. Iran views this as full active complicity in a war being conducted against Iranian civilians and Iranian infrastructure. And Marandi is stating plainly that complicity in the war makes you a target in the war. And whether you accept that legal framework or not, the strategic reality is that Iran has both the stated intention and the demonstrated capability to act on it. Now, the leave tonight warning, most people will dismiss this as rhetoric. It deserves more serious attention than that. Marandi is not trying to frighten ordinary Gulf residents for drama. He is communicating something specific about what happens when power plants go offline in Gulf states during summer temperatures. That is not an abstract outcome. That is millions of people losing access to electricity and desalination in some of the most extreme heat on the planet. The leave tonight warning is his acknowledgement of that humanitarian reality while maintaining that strategic retaliation is coming regardless. That is a chilling combination of statements, and it was delivered with complete composure. The most alarming part of this entire clip is not the specific threats about infrastructure. It is Marandi's observation that Iran is fully prepared and has its response ready, but does not know what Trump is going to do next, because Trump himself does not know. He says one thing and does something completely different an hour later. That is not political criticism. That is a strategic analysis of the most dangerous possible scenario in a crisis with catastrophic potential consequences. Deterrence requires predictability. You cannot deter an action you cannot predict. Iran has communicated its red lines clearly. The uncertainty is entirely on the American side. And an adversary that cannot predict your behavior, cannot fully calibrate its response. That miscalculation risk is where accidental escalation lives. The 1929 comparison is easy to dismiss as hyperbole and harder to dismiss when you actually look at the supply chains Marandi is describing. Fertilizer production depends on Gulf natural gas. Food production depends on fertilizer. Industrial manufacturing depends on petrochemicals. Transportation depends on oil. A simultaneous destruction of energy infrastructure across Qatar, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Bahrain, while the Strait of Hormuz remains closed, would produce supply shocks across energy, food, industrial inputs, and transportation, hitting every economy on Earth at the same time, with no available substitution at the required scale. The 2008 financial crisis came from the collapse of one financial instrument category. This would be every sector simultaneously. And 1,929 may not be hyperbole, it may be a conservative estimate. Here is the bottom line. Marandi just communicated in the clearest possible terms what the next rung of this escalation ladder looks like. No Strait of Hormuz agreement matters if there is no oil or gas left to ship through it. No diplomatic off-ramp matters if the infrastructure that would be rebuilt under any agreement has already been destroyed, and the American families already paying over $100 to fill their tank, already watching food prices rise, already watching their retirement accounts react to every Truth Social post. Those families would be living through the worst economic catastrophe in a century for a war nobody voted for, started without congressional authorization, at the explicit request of a foreign prime minister who spent 40 years trying to make it happen. Marandi is not asking America to sympathize with Iran. He is asking decision makers to do the one thing they have consistently failed to do: calculate the actual cost of being wrong. Iraq taught that lesson. Afghanistan taught that lesson. Libya taught that lesson. The Persian Gulf is not any of those places, and the lesson has still not been learned. Share this video because this warning needs to reach every American who thinks this war ends cleanly. Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling me where you are watching from. Nur Abada's take is not looking away from this. Not now, not ever.